Is the SEC looking at changing its SEC title game? And plus, where are we sitting in recruiting right now? We talk with Zach Berry of omspirit.com.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hello, I am Steven Willis from the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. He is Zach Berry from On3 and the Ole Miss Spirit, and he is undoubtedly the top person to listen to when it comes to recruiting about Ole Miss. So we had to have him on the program. Zach, how you doing, bud?
We're good. It's kind of been a weird kind of bridge to full-on basketball coverage, and now with baseball starting up after the weekend, it's been good. Recruiting, though, I feel is going to really ramp up towards the end of February and into March as you're going to start having camps. And Under Armour's already started their tour. The next camps are underway. Then you'll have Elite 11 regionals. And then before we know it, it'll be the summer. And then we'll be able to start counting down, 104 days until football and all that. And yeah, it'll be kickoff will be here before we know it. But for now, it's a lot of basketball, a lot of baseball, and getting ramped up for this recruiting run that's going to happen in the spring.
Yeah, and this morning I did on the podcast a look at some of the quarterback names that are out there and the fan base is talking about. I'd like to get your perspective on that in just a little bit. But first of all, it's a weird thing. I mean, you're a recruiting guy, sure, but you would be definitely interested in this. And there's a story by Ross Dellinger from Yahoo Sports that came out today, and they were talking about how the SEC and the Big Ten, they're getting ready to meet to basically form out the future of the college football playoff. For people that don't know, a year ago, the SEC and the Big Ten got complete control over the next playoff and able to set it up basically the way they want to. And part of that led to some interesting stuff, Zach. And one of the most interesting thing is this could be the end of the SEC championship game and the Big Ten championship game, because with 4 automatic qualifiers going to each conference has to decide how to use those automatic qualifiers. And the rumor is an SEC number 3 seed versus a 6 seed, an SEC number 4 seed versus a 5 seed, for 2 of those 4 playoffs, with the 1 and 2 automatically getting in the beginning.
I know there's a lot of pushback on expanding the playoff. I think they should go to at least 16. To be honest, we're kind of making our way to more NFL style college football with NIL and the portal. I know it's not, a 1-for-1 swap with free agency, but it's kind of like that. But just do the playoffs like the NFL does. Like, I don't understand why they won't do that. It's the perfect setup. The NFL has mastered it. Just do that. But yeah, I'm all for this. I'm all for more meaningful games. I'm all for, like potentially 2, 3 versus 6 and 4 versus 5. I mean, that's just more good football. I don't understand the pushback with how things are, or wanting to keep them how they are, I should say. I think moving the playoff to 12, every game was good, right? I mean, what was it? Ohio State blew the doors off of Oregon, but for the most part, all the games were good.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot more parity now with the portal and with NIL. Now I know Ohio State just, stocked up and did a great job of retaining talent. I know they added dudes in the portal, but that I don't think that gets said enough, that everybody just thought, oh, well, Ohio State spent, $25 million to buy a title. A lot of it was keeping their guys there. So you do get the regular blue bloods that still recruit very well. But, SMU was in the playoff. If somebody told you SMU was going to make the college football playoff 3 years ago, Steven, you would have laughed. I think it's good for the sport. I think you're going to see more. Some of the, I know it's college football is a long way away. We got a ways to get there for 2025 season, but you're seeing the off season, playoff predictions. And dude, the bracket, I mean, some of the teams, some of the logos you're seeing, I mean, you never would have thought you would see that logo for a playoff 3 or 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
I like it. I think it's just going to make things more interesting and more fun.
Like if that system was in this year, just so everybody knows what's going on, instead of having that Texas versus Georgia meaningless football game that was basically an exhibition before the playoff because it didn't mean anything at that point, you would have 2 games that day. You would have Ole Miss traveling to Tennessee for a chance at the playoff, and you would have LSU traveling to Alabama, and that would make every bit of the money.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's what, like, I don't understand. Like, a lot of people were like, well, they're not going to get rid of bowl games because of all the sponsors and the bowl tie-ins and the money. And, well, what if they get rid of the Big Ten championship? Like, so-and-so, like, who sponsors it now? Like Discover Card or something. Like,
something like that.
Discover's not going to care. Like, they'll get their money somewhere else. And the NCAA is pretty much almost powerless at this point, but like you're still going to make money hand over fist with these games. I mean, there's probably an article out there that tells you the revenue from that Ohio State Tennessee playoff game because Tennessee sent thousands upon thousands of fans. Ohio State's going to show up. I mean, we've talked about it on our show. You've probably talked about it. I mean, imagine a December game in Oxford, Mississippi with, 7th ranked Ole Miss against, I guess they would play I guess if we're going to do this scenario, like you did, talking about the extra games that you're adding, like you get, let's say 6 seed Ole Miss versus 3 seed Notre Dame. I mean, how much money is that making both schools and Oxford, Mississippi?
Yeah.
And then if you flip it to South Bend, Ole Miss people are going to go to that. I mean, that's a bucket list. So yeah, it's probably making you more money than you're making right now when you add these extra very important, meaningful playoff games. And it doesn't matter which team. Like everybody's like, well, if it's not a blue blood, like, man, like the Boise State game was still good. Like Boise State, Penn State was great. And I mean, I just think, I know Indiana got torched by Notre Dame and,
but that was a cool game. The result of the game was one thing, but that was,
like they're both in the state of Indiana. Signetti, argument for coach of the year, did a phenomenal job. Notre Dame was just better, just too physical, but still, it still had some gumption to it. It wasn't just like whatever, I'm not watching this. Like everybody watched it. So that's another thing. Like TV ratings were great. And I just think it's better for the sport to give more programs opportunities to host or go play in these games.
And I do want to point something out before we take a break real quick. So if they do this 3-6, 4-5 situation, there is a very real possibility that Ole Miss plays in the Egg Bowl against Mississippi State, and the next week again host Mississippi State in an Egg Bowl rematch for the playoff in what would be an absolutely apocalyptic atmosphere.
Yeah. Well, that's cool too. Like I was talking to a couple former Ole Miss players earlier this week about this article, and one of them was saying like you could like conference championship weekend becomes like on campus playing games, like for the last spot, like basically like a wild card, like going back to the NFL, like perfect setup. That would be amazing. Whether it's Ole Miss or whether it's Oregon State or, TCU or, whoever, like if you're not a fan of a team that's in that game, you're watching that game.
Yeah. And you have a situation, the Big 12 and the ACC, they're going to get 2 automatic spots. So what they're going to do, what they can do is put the team that wins the conference in one of the automatic and then play the 2 and the 3 game. So all the conferences are basically having play-in games. Zach, ESPN and Fox are definitely behind this.
Yeah. I mean, you're making even more money. You're getting to, and like, just think of like all the doors that'll open for just, regularly scheduled programming or, stuff for SEC Network, ESPN, Big Ten Network, ACC Network, Fox, FS1. I mean, you can just do all of these, in-depth specials on what's going on in Oxford on campus. So-and-so's doing this big charity drive to raise money for the play-in game to get into the playoff. Or, hey, let's go up to Ann Arbor, Michigan, where, Zingerman's Deli is doing this new NIL deal with, Bryce Underwood because he led the Wolverines to a chance to get into the, just all of these different, it's just all encompassing. It's just going to be better for college football. And I don't understand why people don't like that. One of the main things, Steven, is people just don't like change.
Yeah.
People like the way things are. I'm kind of guilty of that with everyday life stuff. I like to be on a schedule and keep things in order during the week. But with college football, I just think it's just going to make it that much more compelling, that much more fun, that much more special. You're just kind of adding to the pageantry when you have an opportunity to have an on-campus, a wild card game. I mean, that's just I don't know who would hate that.
Yeah, that would be absolutely nuts. Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. When we come back, we are going to get into recruiting, and we're going to start with the quarterbacks. We talked about them this morning on the show. We're going to get Zach's opinion on where we should look, so stick around for that. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on that action than FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss that opening tip, you can bet on a fourth quarter comeback or stay in the action other ways. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets to a same game parlay. I personally love FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I feel like I've never missed my chance. Plus, the app is super easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. So right now, new FanDuel customers can bet $150 in bonus bets and get that first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com at your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, so let's go back to Zach Berry and hit the quarterbacks. And on my show this morning, I listed about 7 names of basically names that quarterbacks that are going around the fan base at the moment, going all the way from the very creme de la creme, all the way to some guys that just want an opportunity to get on campus. And right now, and from what I can understand and everybody's talking about, the name that's kind of on the tip of everybody's tongue is Landon Duckworth. Or am I wrong?
No, you're not. You're not. I think that Ole Miss has a lot of buzz with him. Decommitted from South Carolina, and Ole Miss was immediately in the picture. And then hosted him a couple times, went to see him a couple times. I think Ole Miss is the favorite right now. I did a piece, I guess it was a week or two ago, of some, I'm really close to making some RPM picks on these 5 guys. I think Duckworth is the one that I'm the closest to doing one on. Kind of talking about college football and how the game could be so much better. I was watching some old film of some old Pac-10 games, and it kind of hit me. Landon Duckworth, if you remember, Darren Thomas played quarterback at Oregon. Reminds me a lot of Darren Thomas. Really athletic, can really run. Doesn't wow you when he runs. He doesn't look super fast, but he is very elusive and a lot of arm talent. Can make all the throws, and is a hell of a basketball player too. And I think that that's big. Ole Miss, just in general, not just quarterback, but just any position, values that versatility, being athletic, playing multiple sports. I think that that's big for his ceiling to just keep getting higher and higher because he's so athletic, and I think that really helps him with just his footwork and just being a competitor year round. Never taking a break, constantly competing. Ole Miss really likes that part of his game. But yeah, I would say that he's the odds-on favorite right now. And honestly, I've talked to a couple people. It's always tough to do because quarterbacks are, it's a quarterback league, it's a quarterback game. You want to be the guy. I wonder if Ole Miss might try to convince a couple guys to join the signing class, where Ole Miss maybe tries to get 2 quarterbacks. Didn't sign one in 2025. They pick up Pierce Clarkson out of the portal. But I know they really like Duckworth, but I mean, there's probably like 5 or 6 that the staff really, really likes. Now getting 2's that's a tall task. That's a tall order to do, but I do think Duckworth is the favorite right now for sure.
Yeah, I think there is a timeline where Ole Miss does get 2, and I think they get 2 pie in the sky level quarterbacks, because I want to talk about Ryder Lyons a little bit. He's a quarterback out of Folsom High School in California. Ole Miss has a commitment from his wide receiver, Jamison Powell. He is going to take a mission trip this year, so he's not coming to actually what would normally be the class of 2027. Yeah. So technically you could get a Landon Duckworth and a Ryder Lyons, and you got your next 2 quarterback classes taken care of.
Yeah. I mean, that's when I was talking to some people about this one, some Ole Miss sources basically told me that he's being treated as a 27 guy. He's going to finish, he'll graduate early from Folsom this December, and then he'll take his LDS mission and will be ready to get on campus to whichever school he picks in 2027. So, 26 on paper, but a 27 kind of realistically. Ole Miss is still in the picture there. Having Powell certainly doesn't hurt, and he's been to Oxford. The people around him really like Ole Miss, really like Oxford. He came with like a big support group the first time he made the trip. His coaching staff really liked Lane Kiffin, and I think that he knows how valuable that could potentially be for him in his future to play in a Lane Kiffin offense. I mean, you look at the last 2 quarterbacks. Jackson Dart broke all the records. I mean, he's flying all over draft boards, anywhere from mid to late first round to early second round. He's getting a lot of buzz, and that's in large part to the maturity and the development that he got at Ole Miss. And Matt Corral, terrible situation with going to the Panthers, and then the guy that wanted you, that loved you, that drafted you, bails and leaves. Then you're kind of stuck, and you're just kind of screwed at that point. But Matt Corral still, there's a lot of people that would say he's arguably, not only their favorite Ole Miss Rebel quarterback, but one of the best to ever do it at Ole Miss. And you see these guys when they come to Ole Miss, they make these significant jumps from year 1 to year 2. And I think that's a lot, thanks a lot to Lane Kiffin. So Lyons is definitely, I think Ole Miss is still in the picture. Southern Cal, probably the leader. His brother.
And Oregon.
Yeah, Oregon's interesting because of Jared Curtis. I would say Oregon is probably neck and neck with Georgia right now for Jared Curtis. So once these quarterbacks, every year, every class, the dominoes with quarterbacks are going to affect everything. But Ryder Lyons' brother plays at SC, so that helps. BYU's in the picture, and then I would say Ole Miss and Oregon as well. That's probably it. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of so and so committed here. So then these other guys, okay, well, I'm probably going to scratch that school off my list because this guy's going there. It's not always like that, but a lot of the times it is, especially with these high 4-star, 5-star guys. They want to be the guy. They want to be the dude in that signing class to recruit and build around. But yeah, Ole Miss is definitely in it for Ryder Lyons. He's not – Ole Miss isn't getting talked about enough. I think that's probably thanks in large part to surging with Duckworth, but also Ryder's kind of taking his time with it. And he's not going to rush a decision. He'll probably take some visits late spring and summer. And then we'll see. I most of the time, these guys want to get it over with before their senior season starts. Largely just like focus on just being a kid and having fun with your friends and playing your last high school season. But like I said, they want to commit early and start, go find you a 5-star left tackle and go find you a couple 4-star wideouts and a running back. So, yeah, but Ryder Lyons, absolutely. Ole Miss is they've been to see him. He's been to Oxford, and then his teammate and number 1 target, Jamison Powell, is committed to Ole Miss.
Yeah, and one quarterback that is interesting to me is Kashan Henderson out of Houston, Texas. He was the MVP of the Navy All-American game. He is a commitment to Houston, and the reason he's a commitment to Houston, I was told by Brian Smith, the recruiting expert at Locked On, that if Keisean Henderson played something other than quarterback, he would be the number one player in the country. That is the level of an athlete that he is. But Houston was one of the few schools that just said, hey, we're all in on quarterback with you. And Keisean Henderson wants to play quarterback. So as schools start to get into the quarterback game with him, obviously I'm expecting a decommitment potentially from Houston, but we'll see exactly how that goes.
Yeah, he was listed as an athlete for a while and was still ranked pretty high, and then made the switch. I guess he didn't make the switch. He's always played quarterback, but I think everybody saw him and were like, okay, yeah, he's a quarterback. He's not an athlete. Was MVP at the Navy All-American game, really flashed there, made some big-time throws, lots and lots of arm talent. Honestly, I see a lot of it's kind of a hybrid if I'm doing a comp here. And look, comps are just comps,
I've got a comp for him, by the way.
Okay. And I always tell people, like, if you're going to make a comp, like, make it somebody good. Like, why would you make a comp to someone that's average? So, like, I'm not saying this is who he's going to be, but this is kind of who he reminds me of. It's like a little mix of like Jayden Daniels and Vince Young.
I'm going with RG3.
Oh, that's another great one. Cause yeah, he can really run. The Jayden Daniels thing to me is just like his demeanor and his composure just never looks rattled, just kind of floats around, evades people, makes throws. The Vince Young thing for me is just the arm is just effortless. He just kind of flicks it around. Vince was really good at that. Had the funky kind of sidearm, but like just made it look easy. Just a phenomenal talent. I mean, just a guy that's really fun. I've yet to talk to him in person, but I've heard that he's just a joy to be around. Just a really just laid back, chill kid. The Houston thing is interesting because Willie Fritz and them were on him early. And if you're not familiar with Houston and that Cougars program, it's a lot of money. You look at the basketball program and the Fertitta family, they put a lot of money into it. So I'm really interested to see when people start calling and putting together these packages, what's Houston going to do to try to keep him? But he's a local kid, so I think it means a lot to him to not only represent, his hometown, but Willie Fritz and them were on him from the jump, and I think that matters. But it's going to be hard to say no to, the Ole Misses, the Oregons, the Ohio States. When these other schools start coming, Houston's going to have its work cut out for them. But, yeah, a special talent. Lane Kiffin went to see him a couple times in January. They really like him. They want to get him on campus. But it's going to be a dogfight for sure. Not only just trying to get him away from Houston and try to get him to flip, but everybody wants this dude. He's special.
Yeah, and remember, anybody that's watching this video, he goes to a small school. You see Houston, Texas, and you assume a big school. No, he goes to the equivalent of 1 or 2A type high school, secondary of Football Factory. So there is a little bit of an overmatch possibility that happens with his highlights. So when you look at his flash reel, just keep that in mind as well. Now, let's change the subject to some quarterbacks that might just want a chance at Ole Miss. The guys that might be a little bit undersized. And the two guys that I'm thinking of specifically is Luke Fahey, who is about a 6'1", 6 foot tall quarterback as well. He's honestly, if we're going to be honest about it, he's built a little bit like Matt Corral and has an arm similar to Matt Corral. I like Luke Fahey. I put the highlights on the show this morning. He can make all the throws. Whenever he has hole shots going up against a cover 2 defense, which is all the rage in college football, it's effortless. And he's just somebody that if he was 3 inches taller or 2 inches taller, he would be a high 4-star.
Yeah, plays at a really, really good program in California at Mission Viejo. If you're not familiar, that's where Mark Sanchez went. Really consistent, win a ton, put out a lot of good players year in, year out. It's a weird situation. He's basically been in a rotation with another quarterback for 2 seasons. Just by design, the coach wants to do it. I think it's just a game plan thing. Just makes it tough for people to game plan for you with 2 quarterbacks. So his senior season, it will be his game. It will be his team. He will be in there for every drive. He's an interesting one. if we're just going to keep doing the comps here, kind of a little bit of Bo Nix to him. Not very big, but just makes plays, just moves around. Can really spin it. I think you mentioned Matt Corral. That's high praise there. I don't know if the talent's that good because
well, I was talking about the arm talent and how the sleight of frame.
Sure, yeah, sure, yeah. He's not very tall, but just kind of slippery. He's kind of one of those guys you don't really get a good shot on him. He knows how to avoid tackles. He knows how to not get hit. But a really polished game, a really mature game that coaching staff at Viejo is got a lot of experience coaching in college, and got a really good number one target there at Vance Spafford. He's committed to Georgia, but Ole Miss is still coming after him. You've got Oregon still going after him. A lot of people still want Spafford. SC's in there. So he's someone that I think I'm really anxious to see his senior season where he is the guy. It's his team. He is in control. And look, when I talked to him, a very mature approach to it. There was no, moan and groan about how he can't get enough reps. It was just like, hey, I'll do whatever helps team, and that's what we're doing. So I can't really control it. But yeah, talking to the scouting and rankings guys and On3 and Charles Power and Cody Belair, they're saying the same thing. Like they're anxious to see this season for him to see him have the keys and really take over. But yeah, he's one to keep an eye on because I know Ole Miss likes him. They like his game, and we'll see how things shake out this spring and summer where he visits.
And real quick before we have to take a break, Reese Wise, the quarterback out of another football factory from Austin Westlake, he visited Ole Miss recently. Zach, I think this might be the floor of the class because it feels like when he gets a committable offer, he's going to take it.
Yeah, could be a real candidate for a number 2 guy in a class. We talked about Ole Miss maybe taking 2 quarterbacks. That could be this. I think one thing about Reese, again, like we talked about with Fahey, Austin Westlake is one of the better programs in the state of Texas, regardless of classification. Consistently put out dudes. Recently you've got Cade Klubnik went there. They win a lot. First team All-State guy.
All the quarterbacks look the same, like from Drew Brees to Cade Klubnik. It just seems like they just put them out.
Yeah, pretty much. If you want one of those schools that could have a QBHS claim, like if you're doing like a QBU for like high school, they put out a lot of guys that can play. A lot of it, like if you look at his numbers, he didn't like put up like super gaudy numbers. Like they're good numbers, but for the most part in the regular season, Westlake was just blowing the doors off of people, so he didn't play a lot of full games. Almost 2,600 yards, 23 touchdowns. He ran for 15 more on the ground. They ran into a buzzsaw in the title game against North Crowley, which is a hell of a story in Texas. But they just kind of went to almost like a single wing with him at quarterback and just ran him a lot. So some similarities to that where he's a very willing runner, kind of like Jackson Dart, Matt Corral. He's not afraid to stick his nose in there. And I know that Ole Miss is big on having guys that are +1 in the run game. You look at this list, Steven, of all these guys we're talking about. These are all guys that can run and are true dual threats. So yeah, he loved Ole Miss when he went. He said that they were number 1 for him when I talked to him. And yeah, I think this is someone that you need to pay close attention to. Like you mentioned, committable offer. A lot of these are just kind of like visits or camp offers or, essentially one of those, like, here's your offer. That means we're going to keep an eye on you. And, we'll let you know if if you're ready to pull the trigger, we'll let you know if we're ready. But he's, raved about the coaching staff. The town of Oxford was big. He liked that a lot. So yeah, he's someone like you mentioned, like maybe the quote bottom of the class. That's not a knock on him. It's just because Ole Miss is just going after a ton of really good quarterbacks.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen. When we come back, we will hit the state of Mississippi and talk about Tristan Keys and Xavier McDonald. So stick around for that. Welcome back to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. Here with Zach Berry, talking a little bit recruiting. Last segment, we did the quarterbacks. We had a nice little, pretty substantial look at the quarterbacks the last segment. We're going to take a quick segment here at the end and talk about the 2 wide receivers. Mississippi seemingly always has good wide receivers, and this year is no different. Tristan Keys is from Hattiesburg. I talked to him at the Under Armour All-American game. I saw him in practices making effortless catches, and you're like, yeah, this guy is different. He's a guy that everybody was there. Zach, this is the most hilarious thing, and you know how this works because all of the recruiting services were there and everything's going on, and they're asking Tristan, it's like, hey, tell me about A&M. Tell me about Tennessee. And they'd name 4 schools, and they'd write the article, this player is considering these 4 schools. But I said from the beginning that Ole Miss is going to be a factor in this player's commitment before it's all said and done. So in my opinion, Zach, just kind of put a little bit of grain of salt on the national report until this gets a little bit further on, because I'm going to be honest, this Tristan Keys recruitment is starting to look more and more like the Caleb Cunningham recruitment than I even imagined it could be.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. That's kind of what I've been telling people. When Caleb Cunningham first started, first of all, the narrative was, well, he's from a Mississippi State town. He's around a lot of Mississippi State people. He's not going to go to Ole Miss. He's not even looking at Ole Miss. And then I talked to Caleb in the summer at Juice Fest, and he just flat out told me, he's like, I'm looking at Alabama and I'm looking at Ole Miss. And that was it. And look, I would say a lot of this too with Tristan. When they do these interviews, and I know this is not what you're doing, but it's not a knock on these guys that write them. Tristan, especially though, soft-spoken kid, like very quiet. Probably doesn't like doing a lot of interviews, so he's probably trying to do it and get out of there. But I had some Ole Miss sources tell me not to worry about him taking an OV, and a lot of times, Caleb did it. Like Caleb waited until the very end, like after he was committed to do an OV. Because a lot of these Mississippi kids, you don't technically have to do, a quote official visit, because you can just drive, a couple hours up the road. You're not having to worry about a flight and hotel and all that. You just drive up the road. But yeah, I think there are a lot of parallels to the Cunningham deal with Keys. But yeah, Ole Miss is absolutely going to be a factor here. Just the late run of who Ole Miss has gotten from inside the state of Mississippi at wide receiver, Cunningham in the last class. And then, look, you point to the Super Bowl, AJ Brown, Mississippi guy. You got DK Metcalf in the NFL, Mississippi guy. You got Elijah Moore, Mississippi, not a Mississippi guy, but an Ole Miss guy. But then just over the years, Dante Moncrief, Shea Hodge, Vincent Sanders, Mike Espy, all these dudes that are from Mississippi and went to Ole Miss and had success and then got to the NFL. So I think that's important to him. He's really close with Kelvin Bolden. When I talked to him, he said he called him Unc, like that's his uncle. Kelvin Bolden is going to make it very, very hard for him to lead the state of Mississippi. And like I've told people this, after the first couple of years with Lane Kiffin being in Oxford, every year it's progressively got more and more involved in recruiting. You see it this cycle, especially. He's out. He's going to Texas. He's going to Florida. He's staying in Mississippi. He's driving down and, going to see these guys, going to school, going to pedal to, wherever. Like he's much more front facing now. And he was always kind of the closer, in the last couple of years where he wouldn't really get out on the road, but he'd bring guys in and sit down with them in his office. Now he's out. He's on the road. He's jet setting around. And I think that's going to be something to keep an eye on. And I tell people that when Lane Kiffin goes to see a guy at his school, that tells you something. But yeah, Ole Miss is going to be in this recruitment no matter what. They'll be in it till the very end. Keys is a special one. I've seen him in 7-on-7 settings, and I know a lot of people have gripes about it. I think you can learn a lot about dudes in 7-on-7. Big picture wise, I think it shows who wants to compete. You can kind of get a feel for guys' demeanor, how competitive they are. If they, can they be nasty? Can they win one-on-ones? But a lot of it too, which is how good these 7-on-7 teams are, you got to be able to run routes. You can't just, unless you're just a freak of nature, you can't just run around and find space. You got to actually run some routes. Seeing both Tristan Keys and Xavier McDonald in person, pretty polished for guys that were at the time when I saw them were going into their junior year. And I think that separates guys from really taking that next step to college. The Ryan Williams, the Jeremiah Smiths, these dudes that are making noise as true freshmen. It's because they're polished and have a mature game and can actually run routes. And they're not just, hey, I'm the best player on my team in high school, so just throw me the ball. I think that's what separates them. And I think Keys and McDonald both fit in that category.
Yeah. Before we get out of here, the Xavier McDonald not comp, but if it wasn't for Tristan Keys, Xavier McDonald would be the Jayden Williams of this class. He's legitimately that good. He's a high 4-star player. You can't blame Xavier McDonald because Tristan Keys is a legit explosive 5-star player. McDonald's from Morton, which is the same hometown that Deuce McAllister was from, that Shea Hodge was from, and Shea Hodge is an assistant coach at Jackson Academy, but there probably is some semblance of a relationship, which means he's working out with Shea and Mike Espy in that wide receiver factory that they basically have going in Jackson right now.
Yeah. We talked a lot about SC on this show. So if I do a comp for Xavier, it kind of reminds me going back way back in the day, I guess for me, a little bit of trying to think. There's been some really good SC wide receivers over the years, and he's just a really big and just makes plays effortlessly. He's every bit of 6'3". He's probably not done growing, to be honest. I think he's going to continue to fill out, and I think that seeing him live was pretty eye opening for me. And then I was there with our rankings guys. With Cody Belair and Charles Power. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Dwayne Jarrett, if you remember him from SC.
Okay.
Big physical guy, was on those teams with Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart, Lindell White. Kind of reminds me of him, just really physical at the catch point, good hands. But as far as his recruitment goes, he really likes the coaching staff. He talked with our guy, Steve Wiltfong, and he mentioned just the culture. I think that's what the coaching staff does a good job of getting guys in the locker room around the players when they come to visit. Because I hear that more and more now, Steven, is like guys want to know, like, how do the players feel about the program? How do they interact with the players? How do the players treat each other? How do the coaching staff treat the players? I think that's big. Because, at this point with NIL, you're getting money everywhere. So I think a lot of it is kind of, how is my, I guess, quote unquote, home life going to be? Like, how am I going to, what's my experience going to be like? How happy will I be there? Because all the guys we're talking about, they have their pick of the litter where they want to go. So that's kind of what it comes down to is, will I actually, enjoy myself when I'm there, when I'm not playing football? But yeah, another guy that's not a big talker. He's pretty quiet, but I like Ole Miss here. He was on my list of RPM picks that I'm pretty close to. But yeah, I think that Ole Miss has as good a shot as anyone right now. I think LSU and Tennessee are probably the two programs that are trying to make it the most difficult on Ole Miss. But he has a great relationship with George McDonald. And you want to talk about development and getting guys ready for the NFL. I mean, George McDonald already made his presence felt as soon as he got on campus. I mean, you get Trey Harris and Jordan Watkins in the NFL conversation. I mean, Trey Harris is still being talked about by a lot of people, and he was hurt. It felt like he was hurt half the year. I mean, Jordan Watkins, I think, took a huge jump under McDonald. And then, Caden Lee, guy that's became the number 2 guy on the, in that room when Trey Harris went down. And he's someone that's going to be a leader moving forward. And I think a lot of that is because of what George McDonald's done in that room in such a short amount of time. So he was a big part of why Cunningham picked Ole Miss. It's a big relationship guy. He's gonna shoot you straight too. I mean, a lot of these guys, they tell me, they have, almost like a, kind of a, here's what we want to do. Like, set your goals. Here's what goals we have for you. I think that resonates with guys where it's not just like, hey man, come here. Like we throw the ball a lot and we have fun. Like Ole Miss, like they're very detailed and thorough with how they go about recruiting. And I think that sticks out to guys. And, certainly doesn't hurt that Xavier McDonald's from Morton. And, when I talked to Shea Hodge, he told me, he was like, man, this dude's going to make people forget that I even exist at Morton. He's like, he's going to break all the records and he'll probably go down as the best to ever do it at this school. Keys is going to be a dude that's going to, get all the national buzz, but McDonald is every bit as good.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Zach Berry, senior recruiting analyst from the Ole Miss Spirit, the On3 affiliate. What do you got going on over at the Ole Miss Spirit, man?
Man, a huge weekend for Ole Miss baseball. 2 ranked wins at the Shriners Classic up in Arlington. So a great start to the year. So we got a lot of coverage on baseball. Our guy Billy Embody had boots on the ground. He was there. So we got a lot of good stuff about the 2-1 weekend that Ole Miss had. Obviously, we got recruiting, got tons of stuff up with a lot of stories, a lot of interviews, a lot of intel stuff. That's something that I think that is kind of our calling card is we get a lot of intel. It's not just, hey, this guy was offered, or hey, let's talk to this guy. Like we're putting out some good stuff, in my opinion. I think Billy does a great job, and we have a good ham and egg there where we're putting out a lot of really good stuff with some teeth. So if you want to get some intel on recruiting, we got that. Then obviously basketball. I know it's tough go of it on Saturday, but Ole Miss is still, pretty much a lock for the NCAA tournament, and a lot of the opportunities left on the schedule. Quad 1 opportunities. So can really boost that resume. And then Coach Yo has Ole Miss, just back in the conversation, making the tournament. So we've got a lot of, 3-sport type coverage going on with baseball now going. Basketball is in full swing, getting ready for March. And then obviously football and recruiting. That's awesome stuff. Do you have a special going on over at the site right now? We be on the lookout. We will have one rolling out pretty soon. We'll make sure to put it on our social media and all that. But yeah, we will have one coming up pretty soon. So once recruiting starts ramping up in the spring, and we got visits and camps and stuff, we'll have a special that we'll roll out. So if you're not a member, come join the community. We have a lot of fun. It's not just Ole Miss on the message board. We do a lot of other stuff. If you come for the recruiting intel and stay for the severance conspiracy theories. So we got a lot going on. Awesome. Thank you very much, Zach. We'll talk to you later, buddy. All right, man. Appreciate it.